Start us off.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our presentation on how business leaders use cloud environments to recession-proof their company. This is a presentation brought to you by Steadfast Networks and Spot Migration, and we're glad to have you join us today for this cool little informational session. I'm going to take a moment to introduce my counterpart, Will Foret, former DJ, car lover, bourbon drinker, and he also works with the Spot Migration to deliver technology solutions to different organizations. I, including with my awesome indie album cover photo, I am the senior technology strategist here at Steadfast. It's my job to kind of do technical work and architect solutions. I'm going to pass over for a second because I took a moment of Will's glory to identify himself. So Will, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Will from Spot Migration, and as Ed said, definitely a former DJ, been about 10 years, huge cat lover, got a Maine Coon and also a tuxedo cat, and then I am a bourbon drinker, so hey, those after-hour work from home, where we want to just share a little bourbon, we can make something happen. I love those.
We should have just had we should talk to sponsors about potentially just getting the official bourbon of the Spot Steadfast conversation series.
For sure, we could definitely work something out there. So why don't we? So before we start today, you're gonna have a poll that pops up. Just wanted to know, why'd you join us today? Are you looking to kind of educate yourself? Are you looking for alternatives? Maybe you have no idea where to start. So really, if you were to fast forward to the end of the webinar, what are you hoping to gain? What kind of knowledge are you hoping to gain from us or from this webinar? Or what questions do you hope to have answered? If you've got questions right now, please put them to the chat. We will try to make sure that we answer those either in our presentation or at the very end. So go ahead and feel free to put in some questions, and we'll do what we can. So we'll give it a few more seconds. And how are we doing on the polls? Just a little bit longer.
Well, to fill some time while we're doing that. Oh, there we go.
Perfect. So, majority of people here are educating themselves. Great. Well, we hope that this will help you guys. So, Ed, why don't you talk about what we're doing today?
All right. So our agenda today is relatively clear. As we get further into it, you'll learn a little bit more about all these different types of hurdles and benefits that you're going to find from potentially moving to a cloud-based solution. We're going to address the problems. We're going to address some things, the benefits and gains and losses in productivity, some of the costs. We're going to talk about the future of cloud, and then we're going to take some time for Q&A at the end to have a discussion and take on your guys' questions. So I'm going to let Will deliver this one because as the technology strategist, I'm the guy with the giant tape on my glasses, and I can't rightfully say that I'm not going to geek out.
So we do promise that we're not going to geek speak. We're going to really keep it down to a minimum. We're not going to talk to you in ways that, you just don't understand. And if we do, I promise that as long as you ask the questions, we will try to deliver it to you in a way that you'll be able to understand. We talk to business leaders all the time, and these can be complicated issues. So we want to make sure that we, kind of talk about it in business sense, financial sense, costs, risk, etc. I can definitely help you with that.
Right. And one of the things we're going to find is although there are going to be some technological concepts here, most of the concerns we're going to have are related to the business realm and to the human resources side rather than all technology all the time.
Yeah. So, to start off, I want to give you a few stories about what we've seen, different companies that, and these are real companies that we've seen, and the issues that they've had, and kind of what cloud would have done for them. We'll talk about that at the end, but I want to give you a few stories because I think that we've seen them multiple times. They're very relatable, and I think you'll be able to understand, we'll kind of put it all together as we go through these problems as to what it is that cloud does, and we'll hopefully shed some light on, what does it mean to transition to cloud? What does it mean to leverage cloud? And you'll find out that while there's a technology component, it's also a lot about people. So there's a company that we know that they had to start out by getting a lot of large servers, and they had multiple locations, and they wanted to consolidate down to one location. Well, as their equipment got old, they decided to rotate out and buy new equipment, okay? And rather than moving to the cloud initially, they decided to move to just larger servers. And they, had to build out a server room, had to get cooling, things like that. And it turned into actually a very expensive endeavor because there's a lot of pieces to building out your own infrastructure. And because these are large capital expenditures, servers, thousands of dollars, cooling, electricity, there's a lot of hidden costs. There's a lot of components to this. So these are huge hits to, cash flow. There's also, they also had issues with electricity. They found out later on that as they added in more infrastructure, they had issues with electricity, and they were getting brownouts. So all the other locations that were trying to connect to the centralized access, they all of a sudden, every employee in all of their locations stopped being able to work because that central location didn't have the right type of power or the needs from an internet perspective. There was also a problem where there were two problems. One, they actually expanded far beyond their capacity initially of their initial servers. So they had to, because the capacity side was overused, they had to replace those servers and buy new sooner than they had budgeted for. Now, funny thing, maybe not so funny for them, not even a year after that had happened, they had to downsize by quite a bit, by about 50%. And then they actually downsized even more, down to about 20% of where they were at in peak, okay? Now, all that server, those huge capital expenditures that they had, all of a sudden they were barely using those servers from where they peaked out at, right? So there's a lot of money that was put into place for them. So these are a lot of problems that cloud can solve from a cost perspective, okay? Let's talk about another company that we know, and some of the problems that they had with regards to productivity, okay? So this, company number 2, they had no remote plan. They only worked from the office all the time. There was no needing to remote in because, just the type of business that they were. They were only doing financial transactions only within their company. There was no need to work after hours or to work remotely. Their internet was only at their office, and the type of plan that they were on from an internet perspective was great download speeds, no upload speeds. So when COVID happened, there was a huge pain around transitioning to work from home because they just weren't ready for it. So, by not being ready for these things, there's also a loss of then having, premier employees, having those employees that are looking for the technology that, to help sustain really them and their business. Look, employees look for stability in a company. If you're unstable, what's going to keep them there? Sure, maybe a job is, but what about if they can't do their work or it's really painful to do your work? Are they going to want to stick around? And then also with regards to maintenance, because of the issues of being on premise, they had some issues once they actually moved away from the office strategy and started working from home. They also had some issues with being able to access their own servers on premise because of the poor internet speeds. So, you know, again, where all of a sudden people couldn't connect, they had problems with being able to, you know, communicate with each other and even do, you know, simple tasks. These were all issues that needed to be handled and could have been handled had there been a cloud strategy. So let's talk about some issues. Here's another company that we know where there were both cost productivity as well as hard costs, direct costs. So there's a company that we know that essentially was running out of space on their hardware. The hardware was aging, so you know but they had put off upgrading their hardware for quite a while. A lot of servers. They had about almost 30 servers, and then they were waiting until essentially started having intermittent failure, and that intermittent failure caused the entire company to essentially stop working, or a good piece of the company to stop working during those times of intermittent failure. So there was also no control over where, you know, information was saved. Some of it was saved on their computers, some of it was saved on the servers, some of it was even saved on personal machines. So, you know, when, let's say, a sales employee left, they had all that proprietary data on their personal computer and left with it to a competitor. They also, in this particular case, the cost of buying all new servers was about $250,000. Okay, so huge capital expenditure. But they had pushed it off thinking, oh, well, it still works. Why not just wait a bit longer and we'll be okay? And they pushed it to the absolute limit. And unfortunately, COVID happened and they went out of business. Literally within a month, they were out of business. It's a $30 million company, actually closer to 40 million, because of the huge amount of technological debt that happened.
And one of the things to talk about when you talk about technology debt is that it's like there are only two things that are certain in the world, taxes and death. There's also technology debt. And as I used to be a director of IT before I was in this position, and I worked for a nonprofit. And as most nonprofits see, you're going to constantly be pushing costs back. And eventually you're going to run into a situation where technology fails en masse, especially if you've done like a large capitalized purchase that we're talking about. Technology equipment fails usually around the time, you know, for every device in a specific build order has about 7 years on it. And when that 7-year mark hits, everything seems to go at once. And suddenly you're looking down the barrel of 7 years of technical expenses, plus all the rush and emergency, plus downtime and things like that. So your technology expenditures are going to be there regardless of whether or not you've paid them up or not. And it's better to be in front of them as much as possible, because in that situation you can control when your downtime is, how your migrations are going to work, how your company's going to adjust. When you have to make a massive adjustment because of a failure, because you've been pushing off those costs for years, I mean, we'll just explain the scenario with a company that went out of business because of it.
I mean, just think of technological debt as credit card debt. It's almost exactly the same. Your business uses up technology. It uses that technology, and eventually you need to service that debt. You have some sort of amount of payment that needs to be done in order to pay it down. Sure, can you wait? Just like with credit card debt, can you wait? Sure, but at some point you got to pay the piper, and if you wait until the absolute last minute, that's when it becomes the most expensive and the most dire.
This concept also ties back into the previous slide where Will was talking about the concept that I like to call employer of choice, which is a high-end organization is usually based on the quality of its employees. And those premier employees don't just have needs in the form of like a salary or benefits. They want to work in a place where they can be productive, where they can have tools that work for them and things that make their jobs easier so they can really excel at what they want to do. There's a reason that there are these top tier companies in the world, and their employee benefits are more than just having good salary and benefits. They have functional computers that connect properly, that store data, that make them more efficient. Organizations that don't have that lose those employees because they'll move. We see it a lot in the technology field, but it also happens in any highly skilled skill set. Accountants, doctors, lawyers, attorneys, even receptionists. Like these top tier personnel want to work as efficiently as possible and not have to worry about it. And they will find organizations where things work better and they can have a happier work life.
So let's move forward. So one thing, when we talk about cloud, I'm going to give you the very, very non-geek speak way of thinking about cloud. Cloud just means hosted. If you just stop using the word cloud and just use hosted, all it means is that someone else has the physical infrastructure, the servers, whatever it may be, all the supporting infrastructure that you need to be able to run. It's just hosted somewhere else. It's just spaced somewhere else.
The cloud is just someone else's computer.
Yep. So let's.
So Will's had some time to speak on all the real world business spaces, and this is my area. So here are the different things. There's serious benefits you can get from being in the cloud in a lot of different ways. We're going to cover the top four. One, typically the cloud allows you to work from anywhere. Your staff, because your resources are centralized or they're up in the internet, your staff can work from home, kind of like we are right now. I assume everyone on this call is not in an office because of any number of reasons. The transparency to work from everywhere is clear. More accountability. As you have employees working from wherever, you also have a certain minimum base technology that you can keep an eye on how people are working. If you've developed your strategy properly, and this is one of the things that Will's organization does really well, you can actually hold your staff more accountable for their work responsibilities. You're not micromanaging them by having them in physical presence, but you can actually see their work product as it gets developed and comes together. We talk in technology a lot about availability, and that's a word we throw around. Let me define it for you. Availability in a technology sense is merely the ability to contact the resources you need to do your job. So if it's Office 365 email, if it's access to your system's file servers, if it's access to even Google on your phone, if that's up and running, it means you have availability. And as we've seen the world become more transparent when it comes to technology, the lack of availability has people freak out. Like they're like IT guys like us, if our home internet goes out or the cell networks are down, we start getting twitchy because we are off that network. Anybody who has kids sees it when they take their child's device away from them. It freaks them out. Availability is a very real thing. And lastly, operational management. And this is important for both an IT perspective and a business perspective. You want to know how your business is running, how efficient you're doing, how your investments are paying out when it comes to technology resources, and you want to get the most out of your technology that you can. The best ways to do this tie directly into the cloud because most cloud tools integrate these solutions automatically. So,
there's a few costs really that have to be considered. The one is the hard costs. It's the cash flow. It's the CapEx versus operating expenditure. And Ed can really talk about that out of experience. So Ed, why don't you talk to us about that?
Sure. So this happens a lot in nonprofits, but it's also working all over. It was kind of born in the nonprofit space. Because capitalized expenditures used to be the way that everybody wanted to do business. You had accounting departments, they'd know the value of a truck or a building or a high-powered printer that would last 5 years, and they'd make those capitalized purchases, and then they'd capitalize them out so they know what their investments are, which is great. Until you tie into technology and you run into all of the things that Will was talking about in his first 2 slides. It is nearly impossible for a small to medium business to figure out growth for the next 3 years, much less the next 5. So when you're talking about a capitalized expenditure, also in a small business situation, you could be buying $100,000 worth of computing equipment that you may not need in 2 years. So the CFOs are moving more to the OpEx model, which is from an operational expenditure, they want to buy pay-as-you-go resources, and they want to take as many of those large costs out, not expend the capital internally, and buy them as a pay-as-you-go monthly service. And we're finding that even though in a lot of situations, not all cloud is the same when it comes to whether it's resource-based consumption or flat fee-based consumption, it's harder to predict. Most organizations want it to be an operational cost so they can expand and they can contract as their business and their employees do, which allows them to keep their finances agile and loose to spend on other parts of their business.
And as we spoke before about technology debt, it's really just the concept of, the technology, the debt that's incurred by the business with regards to technology. It can be deferred, but it never gets eliminated. So there's a lot of, it removes a lot of the unpredictability away, and it becomes just a credit card payment rather than, waiting for those huge hits to happen. And sometimes they come in very unexpected times. Well, with cloud, it's a lot less unexpected. It becomes a lot more flatline, and you can actually predict it based on the growth of your organization. So let's talk a little bit about, what actually happens here. So, especially those that are working in the financial perspective, cloud becomes a lot more, especially in the scenarios that we're in right now. For those of you that have worked on PPP, that PPP runs out, right? Are you going to have less employees because of it? Can you continue to service those employees? Can you continue to have those employees? Is there enough business to be able to support those employees? Well, with cloud infrastructure, what you can do is you can actually reduce the amount that you are spending on cloud infrastructure because you're not using it. So it increases and contracts based on your usage. So, and as Ed was saying, it takes all those hard costs that are, the overhead costs, and makes them variable expenditures rather than having them as fixed costs. Do you want to expand upon that a little bit, Ed?
I think from a variable cost to a fixed cost comes down to a lot in the way of how your organization runs. So it depends on how much technology you're going to be dependent on. There's a certain minimum base level standard that every organization needs. Like, you notice that all of us are currently sitting in front of a computer or a monitor or something like that. Those are those fixed expenditures, and those are easy to identify, and you can make them as flat as you can. When it comes about the variable cost things, you're looking at one of them right now. Right now, Spot Migration has spent a decent amount of money on Zoom, specifically so we can reach out and communicate with our customers. Steadfast has a number of different applications that help run and manage our data centers and operational centers. Just like anyone in your respective business that is out here watching, you've either got your accounting package, or you have your customized software, or you have an AS400, or you have any number of things. All those different items are unique for each business and all have variable costs. So in the context of this, one of the things we're looking for is trying to figure out how to wrangle them as much as possible, make them more efficient, and then get that money working for you in the most efficient way possible so you can spend the rest on other aspects of your business.
So let's talk about, that technology debt. I've got a Forbes article out there that talks about this in depth. And if you want the link, we can send you the link at the end of the presentation. But I talk a lot about technology debt. Now, specifically around what it takes to actually run smoothly and not have these unexpected events, downtime events. It's also all the hidden costs. There's actually a lot of costs to making sure that your infrastructure runs and continues to run. It's the overhead of the IT expertise. The more on-premise infrastructure you have, the more IT expertise you need. And so everything from the hardware setup to the software, setup, and all the lengths, the maintenance chores that happen in the background that you don't even see, but if they're not done or if they're forgotten about, then at some point it turns into, a huge holy cow emergency event. There's also, all the physical pieces where you've got to make those infrastructure investments. Well, you get rid of those when you're going into the cloud. You don't have to worry about those. You don't have to worry about capacity planning. All the spend that you have around the servers, the networking, and all that, you reduce all of that overhead. You're reducing electricity, you're reducing the cooling costs, you're reducing, the things that support those servers. What about the batteries? What if you have crappy electricity? What if you have crappy internet? These are all supporting things that you have to support for your local infrastructure. If you don't have it, it's going to cause your pain pain.
And I think one of the most frustrating parts about the IT experts is for the high-level services, like the engineering and everything like that, unless you're a large organization, you don't have a need for a full-time employee or enough to keep them completely busy, and they're very, very expensive. So in a situation, you can't live without them, but you don't necessarily want to have one on staff because they're going to be sitting around bored, or you're going to be paying them for time that they're not spending on your organization. And on top of that, I think you find there's a little bit of a stereotype, but it's true. High-level IT experts are kind of prima donnas, and they have specialized skill sets and are typically strong personalities that tie into that employer of choice concept.
So let's talk about what the future holds. When it comes to cloud, let's say some of the latest technologies are desktops as a service, and this is really for security and portability of your data. There's more instances of where people are bringing in their own devices. They're bringing in what we call BYOD, bring your own device, right? Fancy little acronyms. And then we're also having a change in expectations around how we work, right? Instead of working in the office, employees can now work from home. But what if they have an application that is right now on-premise in the office, right? They have to VPN in, they have to go through a lot of hassles, and if it goes down, that IT person, whether you're outsourcing your IT or you have an internal IT, you've got to go to the office and go figure stuff out, whether it's, during the week at any point in time, or maybe there's stuff that has to happen over the weekend. Well, these changes are going to happen regardless of, if you want your business to continue moving forward and to be competitive, you're going to have to be able to make changes on the fly and be able to continue having that business continuity. So let's talk a little bit more about what the future holds on the next slide. So employers, Ed, you kind of talked about this with the premier employers. What have you seen?
So some of the things we're seeing, especially now, I'm in a household with 3 grown adults, and we're all kind of in a unique position to have employers of choice. We were all set up in a situation where every one of us was equipped to already work from home. We already had laptops. Some of us were part-time from home already. And employers are going to need to embrace the concept that they no longer are going to be required to have these massive locations where people are physically working, especially for their knowledge workers. Now, there's still going to be manufacturing, and there are all sorts of other jobs that will require in-office and on-hands. Customer service is one of them. But for your knowledge staff, the future is going to be flexibility from work at home. Like some people find, like I'm a morning person. My day starts at like 7 a.m. on a usual basis when I get in. My wife likes to work until 10, or she starts later in that. Employers are going to need to really focus on not necessarily demanding work hours out of their staff as much as they need to demand productivity out of their staff. And they need to also be able to understand how that's going to work, and they're going to need to change around it. And that has literally nothing to do with technology. That's pure management philosophy.
So, and when it comes to, employees being able to, when you're handling and sustaining and leaving due to the reality of remote, your productivity, probably a lot of companies have felt a hit in their productivity because, their workflows don't have anything to do with working from home. They never considered telecommuting, or maybe just the sales staff and maybe the executives have done some work from home, but then none of the other employees really had anything in their workflow to do with being productive from home. So the new reality is you're going to see companies that are going to fully work from home. I know of companies that have 300 employees that are all working from home. Facebook, and I think Google, definitely Facebook, has said that they won't have anyone in the office until 2021. Okay? Massive, massive companies. Okay? And then, but how are they doing that? In order to be able to do that, they're leveraging cloud. Obviously, they have some of their own resources, but they are leveraging cloud resources to be able to do that. And then when it comes to time around, old school employers, where they're going to have some of the biggest challenges is, the personnel not clocking in, watching over them live, and seeing that they're productive on an 8-hour day. Well, here's the reality. If you have metrics, you can hold someone accountable to those metrics. And if they're not accountable, right, what you measure, you can make decisions on. And when you have cloud-based infrastructure, then, and especially if it's stable, right, then you have nothing really to worry about in terms of productivity from the technology side. Instead of blaming the technology should actually be helping making the employees more productive, because they're no longer having to rely just on their own equipment.
I want to put in a side note here as well, Will.
Sure.
When it comes to productivity, as I said before, we've got a house full of knowledge workers in here. And one of the things that we're finding, because my spouse does a lot with the COVID-19 and operational efficiency and project management, the organizations that were set and ready to work from home, either because of cloud or anything like that, most of their staff are becoming more productive, not less productive as a result of this change. Like, they're not necessarily spending 2 hours a day commuting. They're not necessarily working in their jammies all the time, but they're more comfortable. As they get their workspace set up and configured, their amount of time they spend at work doing sometimes goes up, sometimes goes down, but their productivity seems to be increasing. That isn't an automatic, though. You have to breed that into your organization. It's a philosophical change. So it's not, but it's, to make it clear, all this remote labor isn't necessarily a bad thing you need to be afraid of. In some cases, it can really help your organization.
And then finally, bring your own device. While this has been a reality for a while, it's going to be even more prevalent now. What is preventing, an employee from taking data, whether it's accidentally or on purpose, and putting it onto their own personal laptop? How do you know what is leaving your organization and what's coming into your organization? Because if you're attaching a personal computer to your organization, you don't know what's on that laptop. If you don't have control over it, then, and you don't have visibility around it, how do you know what's happening to your company? Is that device bringing in ransomware? So by connecting through VPN, and they have a virus on their computer, are they bringing that virus and maybe even ransomware to the rest of your company because you allowed a personal device to be connected? These are very real realities of what future is holding. And because you're not sitting behind, let's say, company firewall, you're not sitting behind a lot of those security, software, hardware to kind of prevent a lot of these problems from happening when you're at the office. You got to think about and change what that looks like. And cloud really helps changing that perspective and making it much more manageable.
I think one of the challenges that we skipped over the fourth bullet point, but we'll go back to now, that employers are going to have to face up to become household expenses, not necessarily office expenses. Us IT people, we've had high-speed internet in our homes for the better part of 2 decades. But there are some people that may or may not have, DSL, cable, whatever else. But it's going to be a requirement of employment that you have to have an ability to get to the internet. Your staff need to be able to get there, and with a quickness. And organizations have always kind of shied away from the concept of the expensing the employee's phone or computer or personal home internet. I think it's going to shift. You're going to see the dollars spent on real estate and huge office space to kind of transition to whether or not you're going to expect of your employees to buy their own way when it comes to BYOD or bring your own internet, or if you're going to subsidize it. And I think that's something that you kind of need to take a look at. And I think a lot of companies are going to start addressing, especially at the corporate level.
So thank you, Ed. So we hope that we helped you, answer some of your questions, but I'm sure you've got some other questions out there. And we also had some questions that had come in initially with regards to when you filled out those forms and surveys. I'm going to read out a few here. Are you doing any IoT projects? So speaking for ourselves, that is really, really, really broad. IoT, like even Wi-Fi, is part of IoT projects. So for those of you that don't know what IoT is, it's Information of Things. It's really about devices that aren't necessarily computers or servers. They might be sensors, or they might be, small devices, or your refrigerator, there you go, that are connecting out to the internet, and somehow there's some information exchange over the internet with that device. That's IoT in a nutshell, okay? Are we doing IoT projects? Directly, no. Indirectly, yes. I guess we just haven't had the opportunity to implement a project yet, but I wouldn't say that it's far-reaching. We do understand it.
And while Steadfast has not directly implemented IoT on like an on-premise situation, we have partnerships with a number of companies who are our customers that are big-time IoT providers. Like they're tracking objects all over the planet via shipping and receiving and individual components. So this technology is really being used hard, and it requires cloud services because the whole nature of Internet of Things is that it's out on the internet and it could be anywhere and it needs the phone home. And you're going to start seeing more and more of this as time goes by. Everybody's got either a Google, like a Chromecast in their house, or an Alexa device, or anything, number of things. Those are all those types of units.
So another question here is financial consideration. What are the financial considerations in migration from on-premise to cloud? So there's really two pieces. There's the resources. So those are the physical resources. So instead of purchasing hardware, it's now you're carving out resources. You're buying a set of resources, and then there's also the labor component. So this is where Steadfast and Spot Migration, for example, we would be working on the on the actual migration, but then you've got also the resources from Steadfast that we would have to spec out. There's also capacity planning, right? So that way you have some idea of how many resources. So we have tools to be able to spec that out and to figure out what your needs are. Ed, do you want to kind of add to that?
I would also add there's a human component. There's a cost that comes in from the local organization, that this isn't something you outsource. You can have someone do this work for you. You can have a provider take care of it. You're still going to have to grab the bull by the horns in the organization. It requires philosophical change. It requires your staff to be flexible and be willing to learn new ways to do things. And I've seen these projects be successful or fail all on the morale of the users. Happy users can take a poorly implemented project and make it work, and the most unhappy users can make the best planned and executed project fail hard. So one thing that organizations need to understand is that it's not something you outsource. You have to embrace it. You have to get people excited about it. You have to, bring people in and involve them. And that costs time and it costs money. And you need to make that investment as well.
100% agree. We've seen both sides of the table, and if you have, we've seen internal IT that is totally against the cloud. They're saying that it's unsafe, and it'll make the project fail because they're against it from day one, and they don't necessarily understand, all the pieces to it, and they'll block the project. On the flip side, we've also seen business owners that don't necessarily understand it entirely, but they understand the concepts behind it, and they kind of vision their way through having their organization be able to essentially move to the cloud. There's workflows, things like that that have to change. We've also been able to help and educate internal IT departments understand how their organization can leverage it, and we help them with those. So that way, there's a lot of high-level components that are needed during implementation, and then there's some maintenance along the way. But then we'll help the internal IT kind of do what they traditionally do, and then we help kind of as an additive measure take care of the things that maybe they haven't taught or haven't learned, and we already have all these processes around. So let's see here. So great questions. Do you offer any alternatives to Zoom, Slack, Office 365, Gmail Suite? So this is kind of, what do you mean? What is it that you're looking for? Are there alternatives? Sure, but I'm trying to tell you what piece of software you should or shouldn't be using usually requires a discussion. I can't tell you which one is going to work for you specifically, and I know it sounds kind of like a cop-out, but wouldn't you want something that works specifically for your organization because of your workflows, your processes? If none of those work for you, there might be a compliance issue. I don't know. Reach out to me or reach out to Ed if it's regarding to hosting, more probably with Ed if it's regarding to what software, what are our needs, things like that from the IT side. Talk to me. And then I hope that answers that. We can definitely take it offline. Challenges and risk mitigation, physical infrastructure to cloud. Oh boy, that's a big conversation. Ed, do you want to try to summarize that one?
Certainly. I think there was a time, and this is, you were talking about the IT people that are opposing the cloud. We lovingly call them the server huggers, but they don't want to let stuff go. And mainly, I think one of the, where you're coming at with the challenges and the risk is that there used to be a philosophy that I have my servers here, they're safe, and I can keep an eye on them. And that might have been true when you could physically lock your office and you weren't connected to the internet. And then you potentially had an IT guy that was taking care of it. Now we're starting to see the shift of risk mitigation moving to the cloud, specifically because virtual desktop, because in a massive data center, we have a heck of a lot more resources when it comes to firewalls, advanced security components, things like that. And we have, it goes back to that IT staffing issue, we have the resources necessary to have those IT experts that are going to help do the risk management, the security of those components, and take care of the physical security aspects. You can go really far down the rabbit hole based on what type of organization you're in. Whether or not you're medical, you've got HIPAA data, you've got SOC data, you've got PCI credit card, DSS. There's a lot of risk. There's a lot of ways to manage it. Technology doesn't solve all these problems. Technology is merely a component that can help you once you've got a grip on what the risks are and how you've assessed them. And that's one of the things that I think Will and his team do really well is they come and look at a holistic approach and don't just look at it as IT problems, but they look at it as business risk and optimization, correct?
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's not just IT. We have to look at it as more than just IT. We look at what's the end goal your business wants to be in, and then how's the IT strategy going to support wherever your business is going. So I know that we've run a little bit over time, but we have a couple more questions. These have been great questions. List of services included. I'm just going to say that in a nutshell, we're an IT department. We both supplement internal IT departments as well as we are the entire IT department for small, medium businesses. Ed?
Oh wait, that was a, repeat the, I was
essentially, list of IT services included. So what kind of services do you have?
So Steadfast, we've been around for a very long time. We've been around since before the word cloud was coined. We focus heavily in the co-location, managed infrastructure as a service, public and private cloud space. and this is one of the reasons that we work really well with Spot. Spot handles a lot of the on-premise technology aspects. We stick specifically to the cloud services side of things, which is up in the data center, in the secure facilities, and that's our wheelhouse, and we like to live there.
Perfect. There was a question about PCI DSS compliance, what's needed for PCI DSS compliance. So this depends on the type of compliance that you need. Are you a provider versus you're just accessing the data? This could be a deeper conversation. Cloud really does solve a lot of the issues around PCI DSS, but it does require a conversation around it, because what is it that you're looking for? Are you a company that's actually a credit card processor versus are you a company that is accessing credit card processor data? There's going to be two completely different conversations.
And one thing, this is one of my favorite lines that I've used in my career all over the place, because we used to handle a lot of credit card data. The PCI DSS compliance is 13 sections. Only 5 of them are related to technology. So the other 8 are actually internal process and business process, things like that. Technology is merely a component. And this is yet another example of where technology is an asset that could help you, but you can't use technology to completely solve the problem.
What are some top practical tips? I'm assuming you're talking about cloud and cloud migrations. So, and if you want to expand upon that, let me know. But what are the top practical tips? I'll take a piece of this, which is if you're an internal IT department or you have internal IT, if you've never done a cloud migration, you need to work with someone that has done it before. If you don't, it will be botched. I don't care about capabilities. It's not so much about the technology, it's about the process. The process is so huge. A little bit of straight up admission, when we first started doing cloud migrations, it took us hundreds of hours to do a cloud migration that now takes us only tens of hours. Give you an idea of experience and building process around this. If you're doing it in your internal IT department, this is your first time doing it, how often are you going to be doing this? Work with a partner if you're internal IT, and work with someone that has done it before and can tell you, give you stories about what that looks like, because otherwise it's going to fall on its face. Talking out of experience here.
Yeah, that's completely true. I think one of the other parts is that IT, and this is something that is not necessarily understood by people outside of IT or even the legal industry, like lawyers grasp this concept, that just because you have a cousin that's in IT, he could be a software guy or he could be wherever else. It doesn't mean he knows how to fix your computer, doesn't mean he knows that. Technology is highly specialized skill sets, and cloud migration is a huge industry because it requires really smart people that aren't just doing technology, they're doing process. This is a professional kitchen-like design. It isn't necessarily being creative. It's putting out the right plate every single time and maintaining a certain level of standard. And cloud migrations, when they go well, users don't even feel them. When they don't go well, they feel nothing but them. And if you think your users are unhappy when you rolled out a single piece of software and it didn't go well, when you're talking about migrating your entire platform to a cloud-based solution, you mess that up, it goes very, very poorly. And you have a major hit to morale. And the other challenge is, even if you make it perfect the second run, people will never remember that you did it right. You only get one impression on this.
I know that there were a few other questions, but we are running out of time here. So rather than trying to take up everyone's time around this, if you've got burning issues, you want to get these questions answered right away, please reach out to us. If you haven't already, then please copy our information there. And then this is a recording, so if you need to, this will be recorded, or excuse me, it is recorded, so it will be posted up, and you'll be able to also get information there. You can reach out to us, and we'll try to do as best we can with answering your questions. So, and to kind of conclude, our next webinar is going to be on Wednesday, June 3rd at 1 p.m. And we're going to be talking about really the 8 simple questions to grow your business. So no matter what economic environment. And we're actually going to bring in our EOS implementer. So this, for any of you that don't know what EOS is, it's the entrepreneurial operating system, which is what we run on. And Dan Zawacki, who used to own Lobstergram, is going to be joining us and talking about really around everything around process and what the drivers, what the levers are around your company, and especially in this type of an environment, how you can, how can you keep your company safe? You're going to be able to see a lot of those things within, the work from home and COVID-19 environment. So thank you, everyone, and until next time, adios.
Thank you. Good job.